I would never talk to that character because she doesn't fulfill physically.
Tonight, we lift the final curtain on a legend's twilight. At 88, Dustin Hoffman stands as a man whose face once mirrored every character he played. Ask yourself, how does the shy kid who fumbled through awkward comedy roles become a two-time Oscar winner whose performances shattered expectations? Today, the laughter has faded, replaced by whispers of illness and solitude, testaments to a life spent in relentless pursuit of authenticity. Prepare to navigate the thin line between artistic triumph and human frailty. This is not just another celebrity exposé, it is an intimate journey through the high peaks of fame and the dark valleys that follow. Try not to cry. These revelations will break your heart. Stay with us as we uncover every hidden chapter. Only then will you truly see the man behind the myth. From his earliest seconds on screen, Hoffman became a vessel for unscripted emotion. In 1967, The Graduate unraveled the golden-haired newcomer's awkward charm, a performance so raw it startled audiences and redefined leading roles for generations. Then came Midnight Cowboy, where his portrayal of a drifter in broken New York cabaret painted desperation with haunting honesty. Rain Man followed, an autistic savant whose every twitch, every silence spoke volumes about isolation and connection. Along that journey, he racked up awards, applause, and adoration. But behind curtain calls and red carpets lay restless ghosts, moments when Hoffman's appetite for transformation collided with his own demons. He poured every ounce of himself into characters, but sometimes that depth invited shadows to come too close. But genius rarely walks in step with seamless perfection. Every accolade seemed to cast another spotlight on the cracks beneath. Whispers of erratic behavior surfaced, stories of tense on-set arguments, late-night binges fueled by excess, and the uneasy tension when method acting blurred the lines between character and man. When his hunger for authenticity drove him past polite boundaries, rumors turned to accusations, names circulated, young interns, co-stars, even friends, bearing witness to moments they could not unsee. The same intensity that brought him to life also left others feeling violated. How could a man capable of such empathy on screen become the source of fear behind the scenes? This duality defined Hoffman's legacy as much as any trophy ever did. In 2017, as accountability movements swept across Hollywood, the spotlight turned on Hoffman with a new ferocity. Anna Graham Hunter, just 17 and bright-eyed, stepped forward to recount encounters on a Broadway set where compliments veered into creepy territory, leaving her frozen and uncertain how to react. Corey Thomas, barely 16, described a moment she found herself trapped behind a closed door with the man whose face commanded global screens. Then came the whisper from Meryl Streep herself, the titan of cinema, describing a real slap on the set of Kramer vs. Kramer. Each allegation was a piece of a darker puzzle, forcing fans to grapple with the fact that their hero might also be a predator. Would you find it in yourself to confront such painful reality? Stay tuned as we peel back layer after layer of this heartbreaking tale. Beyond controversies, another battle raged unseen, a struggle against his own body. After decades of cigarettes, late-night parties, and a disregard for moderation, Hoffman was diagnosed with throat cancer. A cruel irony for a man who built his fame with sound and silence. The illness crept in quietly, muting his once commanding voice and forcing him to retreat from interviews, premieres and spotlights. Friends describe his world now as hushed and fragile. He spends mornings in muted contemplation, evenings lost in memory, grappling with pain that no Oscar can vanquish. Scans and surgeries replaced scripts and cameras, hospital corridors substituted for studio backlots. Yet in this vulnerability, a different strength emerged, a man confronting his mortality with the same fierce authenticity he once brought to every role. Prepare to meet the Dustin Hoffman few have seen, where illness uncovers the rawest form of humanity. Up next, we trace his steps back to humble beginnings, a shy boy from Los Angeles who discovered his voice by making classmates laugh. We'll explore the crucible of method acting in New York's gritty studios, the breakthrough moment that forever altered Hollywood's expectations, and the years when fame was both a blessing and a curse. You'll witness his soaring triumphs, the painful decisions that fractured marriages, and the moments when power and passion collided in ways no one anticipated. By the end, we'll ask the hardest question of all. Can we admire the man who brought so much beauty to our screens when shadows of his past still linger? Stay with us to uncover the full story. He was born on August 8, 1937, in a modest Los Angeles home where the hum of a rattling fan mingled with the scent of furniture polish. His father, Harry, had once supervised props at Columbia Pictures before the Depression cost him that safety net, driving him into furniture sales. His mother Lillian, a housewife with an artist's soul, read poetry aloud at night, spinning tales that carried young Dustin into worlds uncharted. They named him Dustin after a silent film star, never guessing he'd redefine acting decades later. His earliest memories were of awkwardness, a small boy with thick glasses, braces, and relentless acne, invisible in a family that prized scholarly success above all. School corridors offered little refuge. While his brother Ron dazzled teachers with top grades and debates, Dustin languished at the bottom of the class. He struggled to speak, each sentence a battle. Bullied by classmates, he learned to mask fear with humor, jokes, impersonations, and pratfalls that earned laughter but did little to soothe his bruised confidence. Yet in those moments something shifted, a realization that if he couldn't win through talent, he could at least conquer an audience's heart. Lillian's soothing words, "Art can save people," Dustin replayed in his mind every day, planting a seed that would sprout later in dank audition rooms and on dimly lit stages. After high school, Dustin enrolled at Santa Monica College, initially pursuing piano to honor his mother's dream of a respectable career. But classical technique eluded him, and hours at the keyboard yielded more frustration than applause. Searching for an easy elective, he stumbled into an acting class. It didn't require memorizing sonnets, it demanded honesty. In the first session, sweaty and self-conscious, Dustin stumbled through a monologue. Instead of ridicule, he felt an unexpected thrill. The room's energy shifted, and for the first time, he felt truly seen. He signed up for more workshops, devouring every lesson from his instructor, a former Broadway actor who spoke of truth on stage as a revelation rather than a performance. In 1958, with only $50 and a battered suitcase, he boarded a Greyhound to New York City. There, he shared a cramped apartment with two unknown roommates, Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall. By day they washed dishes, sold novelty toys on street corners, and typed freelance ads. By night, they transformed in Lee Strasberg's method acting studio. Dustin learned to become not just a character, but an entirely new psyche. He practiced living pain, joy, and rage until the line between self and role vanished. The apartment's single bathroom doubled as a rehearsal space. He paced there, speaking as characters no one else heard. Neighbors complained, but he was undeterred. Every quiver in his voice, every frozen gesture, was a step toward mastery. Early career days were brutal. Rejection letters piled up. Casting directors called him too ordinary, not photogenic enough, lacking star quality. Yet he persisted, performing off-Broadway in ragged theaters, living on beans and ambition. His big break came when director Mike Nichols scrolled through hundreds of headshots for a new film about youth and disillusionment. Nichols sought someone unguarded, someone real. At a rough audition, Dustin sat across from him, clutching a scrap of paper instead of a script. Nudged to improvise a scene about waiting for a bus, Hoffman stumbled at first, his awkwardness painfully genuine, then found rhythm in stillness, letting the silence speak. Mike Nichols leaned forward, eyes fixed. "That's what I need," he said simply. Landing the lead in The Graduate changed everything. Overnight, the shy boy from Santa Monica College became the face of a generation. On set, Dustin insisted on authenticity. He wore the same cheap suit day after day, refused glamour shots, and even kept the sunglasses he wore in the film rather than switching to fancier props. He argued for improvisation, making the famous pool scene feel spontaneous rather than staged. His performance as Benjamin Braddock struck a nerve, capturing the confusion and longing of post-war youth. The film's release in 1967 ignited a cultural explosion. Long hair and slouchy swagger became symbols of rebellion, all traced back to Dustin's breakthrough portrayal. Fame arrived like a tidal wave, paparazzi flocked to his every move. Suddenly invited to swanky parties, hand-picked for magazine covers, he was swarmed by fans projecting their own lost dreams onto his uneasy smile. But behind the adulation lurked a darker storm. The method that served him so well in New York began blurring boundaries on set. Colleagues whispered of tense outbursts when a scene didn't feel real enough, of restless nights fueled by whiskey and ambition. His intensity, once a rare gift, sometimes veered into obsession. Friends noticed hollow eyes behind the bright face. In that blur of triumph and fatigue, a different Nevada of his mind opened, one where euphoria and dread coexisted in the same breath. And yet none of this compares to what came next, the ascent to an even greater triumph with Midnight Cowboy. Ratso Rizzo, a crippled drifter from Queens, could have been a caricature in lesser hands. But Dustin spent weeks living among New York's homeless, learning their gait, their quiet desperation, their whispered humor as survival. When cameras rolled, he became Ratso, half scoundrel, half poet, a portrait of humanity on the edge. The film earned him his first Oscar nomination. Instead of acceptance speeches, Dustin returned to his New York loft, sat alone in a dark room and wept. He had broken records, redefined roles, and even Hollywood was talking about this small-framed actor who carried entire scenes with subtle indifference. Yet in private, he was already haunted by questions. How much of Ratso was himself? At what point did he lose the line between creation and confession? After the raw authenticity of Midnight Cowboy, Dustin Hoffman's career soared to even greater heights with Rain Man. In 1988, he delivered a performance that transcended acting and entered the realm of pure empathy. He immersed himself for 12 weeks among autistic communities, studying the rhythms, the stutters, the quiet obsessions that defined them. On screen, every gesture, every blink of his eyes spoke of a mind both brilliant and isolated. Audiences wept, critics applauded, and the Academy awarded him his second Best Actor Oscar. Yet as he stood beneath the golden statuette's glare, he felt a familiar twinge of emptiness. The applause faded too quickly, the victory speech too hollow. He knew in his bones that the next role would demand an even deeper sacrifice. Barely catching his breath, Hoffman pivoted to comedy, a move no one saw coming. Tootsie, released in 1982, cast him as Michael Dorsey, an actor so desperate for work he masquerades as a woman to land a role. Under layers of makeup and a wig, Hoffman discovered a new dimension of performance. As Dorothy Michaels, he embodied the humor and vulnerability of a woman striving to be seen and heard. The film became an instant classic, earning 10 Oscar nominations and solidifying Hoffman's reputation as the ultimate chameleon. But behind the laughter, the set was fraught. Director Sidney Pollack grew exasperated as Hoffman went method even when playing Dorothy, insisting that she be treated as a separate persona. Crew members whispered of late-night arguments over voice inflection and the curve of a cheek line. Even triumph demanded a price. Then came Lenny, a role that demanded Hoffman confront his own limits. Playing the controversial comedian Lenny Bruce, he studied the man's court transcripts, audio recordings, and biographies. Once he stepped onto the stage within the film, he left Dustin behind. Channeling Bruce's defiance, his fear, and his unwavering sense of justice. Critics lauded the performance as a tour de force, but the production nearly consumed him. He would break character only to collapse in the green room, exhausted beyond measure. Friends said he emerged from the experience changed, as if the man he played had not let go when filming ended. All the President's Men followed, a film about two journalists chasing the truth behind Watergate. With Robert Redford, Hoffman embodied Carl Bernstein's restless pursuit of justice, improvising entire scenes when pressured by the film's tight schedule. His energy fueled an urgency that mirrored real investigations. When the camera stopped rolling, he was left with a hollow ache, as if he had handed over a piece of his soul to the cause. The film's success only deepened his belief that acting could change the world, yet it also deepened his isolation. With each new character, he burrowed one layer further away from himself, leaving a void that only more work could fill. Behind the scenes, relationships frayed. His first marriage to Anne Byrne, once a haven of love and promise, began to crack under the weight of fame and his relentless devotion to his craft. Home became an extension of a film set, with Hoffman rehearsing lines in the kitchen and disappearing into character while Anne tended to their two young daughters. She felt neglected, a supporting actress in the drama of his life. Late-night calls from co-stars, whispered conversations in dimly lit corners, and his mounting schedule eroded their bond. In 1980, after 11 years together and an expensive divorce settlement, their marriage ended. Hoffman paid $4.5 million and walked away with a heart heavier than any Oscar he'd ever won. Rather than retreat, Hoffman dove back into work, seeking refuge in stories that demanded more of him. He found stability only years later when he remarried, this time to Lisa Hoffman, a lawyer with a calm demeanor and steadfast loyalty. With her, he learned to set boundaries, to differentiate between a role and real life. He took fewer risks on set, chose scripts that allowed for breaks, and negotiated clauses that guaranteed family time. Yet the hunger returned whenever a script offered a chance at greatness, and he rarely refused. The 1990s became a study in contrasts. Blockbusters like Hook and Outbreak revealed his versatility. Voice roles in animated films like Kung Fu Panda introduced him to new generations, and smaller indie projects reminded everyone of the quiet power that first defined him. Each project, however, pressed him to the brink. He kept a journal of injuries, sleepless nights, and moments when fan adoration felt like a distant echo. He quipped that age was the only enemy he had never managed to deceive. His legacy was both heroic and haunted, inspiring awe and introspection. Yet as the world continued to marvel at his artistry, darker clouds began to gather over Dustin Hoffman's legacy, shadows that would eclipse even his brightest triumphs. In the wake of global shifts toward accountability and transparency, whispers turned into allegations, and whispers became headlines. What once seemed like isolated rumors were suddenly reframed as a pattern of exploitative behaviors. For decades, colleagues had exchanged uneasy glances on set, staff had felt compelled to smile through discomfort, and interns had silently carried diaries filled with trembling words. Only when the Me Too movement ignited in 2017 did these private misgivings combust into public testimony, forcing fans to confront a version of Hoffman that bore little resemblance to the hero on screen. Anna Graham Hunter was the first to speak out, a bright-eyed 17-year-old intern assigned to help Hoffman during a 1985 Broadway revival. In diary entries, she described compliments that drifted into innuendo, flocked with gestures that made her skin crawl, and moments when she found herself frozen, powerless to respond. Then came the tale of Catherine Rossetter, a co-star backstage at a regional theater, who recalled an unsolicited touch that made her recoil as if alarm bells had rung. Soon after, 17-year-old Corey Thomas filled in the harrowing details of an afternoon when she was left alone in a dressing room while Hoffman, wrapped only in a towel, made explicit demands. Collectively, these accounts painted a portrait of a man who used his power to manipulate vulnerable young women, a betrayal that stunned the industry and fractured the imaginations of fans. Perhaps the most poignant moment arrived when Meryl Streep, the four-time Oscar winner whose every performance redefined screen acting, recounted a real slap on the set of Kramer vs. Kramer. She spoke calmly years later. One second she was shooting a pivotal scene, the next she felt a stinging blow delivered by her scene partner. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't staged. It was a moment of violation that was later immortalized in the film's final cut. Streep admitted she froze, torn between professional loyalty and personal outrage, until the director finally called cut. In that instant, the cozy illusion of cinema shattered, revealing the cost exacted by an artist who demanded emotional extremity at any human toll. With the storms of scandal and illness behind him, Dustin Hoffman found an unexpected liberation in his final performances, roles that did not demand reinvention, but simply invited him to be himself, seasoned by years of triumph and failure. In his late 80s, he no longer chased characters so much as allowed life's weight to settle into them. Scenes unfolded with quiet dignity, every gesture heavy with memory, a subtle tremor in a hand raised to wave goodbye, a hesitant smile that carried decades of longing, an unhurried glance that spoke of love, regret, and the wisdom that only time grants. These last projects weren't blockbusters meant to dazzle. They were intimate vignettes, cinematic whispers about aging, legacy, and the search for peace. One of his most poignant late-career turns came in Quartet, where Hoffman stepped behind the camera as director rather than leading man. Setting his lens on a group of retired musicians, he crafted a tender, bittersweet tribute to aging artists grappling with the fading embers of their glory. Watching him guide performers across that stage, you could sense how personal the story felt. Hoffman, once the restless performer, now the thoughtful mentor, allowing others their final bows while reclaiming his own quiet satisfaction. Audiences marveled at how he captured the fleeting brilliance of old friendships, the echo of applause in empty halls, and the gentle ache of memories that refused to fade. Then came Myra Wewitt's Stories in 2017, a character so closely aligned with Hoffman's own journey that critics spoke of life and art melding into a single breath. As an aging painter haunted by the ghosts of past choices, he inhabited every scene with a vulnerability few had witnessed before. When the camera lingered on his face, every wrinkle told a story of perseverance. The early years of struggle, the dizzying heights of stardom, the bitter sting of betrayal, and the quiet resolve to keep living. In one scene, he brushes dust from an unpainted canvas, pausing as if asking the audience, "Is there still something left to create?" It was a moment of heartbreaking clarity, Dustin the artist pondering the final blank page. Even voice work in Kung Fu Panda 4 bore a new tone. As Master Shifu, his lines carried a softness that undercut the character's usual sternness. Where younger actors might have added bravado, Hoffman infused each syllable with humility, a mentor who, in his twilight, learned that guidance often flows best through gentle wisdom rather than forceful decree. When he spoke of balance, it felt less like a cartoon catchphrase and more like a personal testament, balance between power and compassion, success and humility, art and morality. Children thrilled to hear the familiar voice, unaware that behind the microphone stood a man whose real-life journey now infused every word with deeper resonance. In Francis Ford Coppola's ambitious 2024 ensemble drama, Hoffman played a retired studio chief, reflecting on a lifetime of filmmaking. Surrounded by younger stars, he no longer dominated each frame, but instead observed with measuring silence, offering counsel only when necessary. This cameo was more than a nostalgic nod, it was a meta-commentary on passing torches, on how the legends of yesterday can guide the artists of tomorrow. In interviews, Hoffman spoke of his role as a blessing, finally stepping back to watch new talents rise, even as he confronted his own mortality. And yet perhaps most revealing were his choices in indie projects like Tuner and Luca Mortis, small-budget films that explored grief, reconciliation and the search for redemption. Unfettered by studio mandates, he delved into raw material, a man returning to his childhood home, haunted by family ghosts, an unlikely friendship with a grieving teenager that softens both souls. Scenes unfolded at a deliberate, almost meditative pace, long silences punctuated by the rustle of leaves or the crackle of a fire. Hoffman's performance emerged as an act of unhurried honesty. He didn't hide behind elaborate makeup or audacious accents. Instead, he stood bare on screen, aging visage fully visible, voice sometimes trembling with authenticity. Critics noted how his later roles embraced restraint. Gone was the relentless method immersion that once defined his process. Instead, he brought the full spectrum of his lived experience to each character. Directors commented that Hoffman no longer needed to rehearse vigorously. He arrived ready, having carried decades of emotion in his bones. Co-stars spoke of a serene presence, someone who listened as much as he performed, whose quiet intensity elevated every scene. Watching him was like reading a memoir without words. Each glance, each breath, each pause mapped an archive of joy, regret, and enduring humanity. Off-screen, Hoffman's daily rituals mirrored his artistic shift. Morning walks in Central Park became a practice in mindfulness. He would pause under gnarled trees, close his eyes and breathe the city's rhythms. In a modest East Side workshop, he sanded and refinished old furniture, reviving pieces once discarded and forgotten. Friends say he found solace in the tactile act of restoration, a metaphor for his own desire to build something lasting from life's scraps. Family dinners with his grandchildren became sacraments of love. He delighted in their chatter, their awkward jokes, their unfiltered laughter, absorbing their energy like sunlight through fall leaves. These moments of simplicity informed his performances. In one final scene for an untitled drama, Hoffman sits at a family table, listening as conflicts swirl around him. He doesn't intervene, he just observes, offering a small nod or a soft word at the right instant. Viewers saw a man who had stopped trying to fix every fracture and instead learned to hold space for others to heal themselves. It was not the theatricality of his youth, but the profound generosity of an actor who knew that sometimes the greatest impact comes from silence, rather than spectacle. By the end of this chapter of his life, Dustin Hoffman had transformed aging from a liability into an asset. His voice, once a tool for projection, now carried the fragility of every scar, creative, personal, and physical. His face, once a blank slate for dozens of characters, became an indelible map of a life fiercely lived. He taught us that the final roles of a great actor need not be grand leads or explosive climaxes, but honest reflections of a man who dared to show his true self, flaws and all.